Department of Education and the Brooklyn Law School. The Department of Education and the Brooklyn College, not law school, but education department. And so I decided to go that route, and I entered into this Brooklyn College Master's Education program, which involved actually teaching in classrooms in a public school. And I started doing that. I went on to earn my master's degree in education. And then I proceeded to start teaching. And I taught in a school in Bedford-Stuyvesant, PS 56. And I taught there for 11 years. And I had this basically gave me, my background in terms of education and my desire, to improve education. I really, was in the trenches and saw it firsthand. I then, still wanted to be a lawyer. And so I went to law school in the evening at St. John's Law School and got my admission into the bar of the state of New York. And I became a neighborhood lawyer. And my political, background basically started during this whole period of time when I was, a teacher and then became a lawyer. And it really, the source of it was, there was an incinerator in my neighborhood. And the incinerator was causing a lot of problems, health problems, and it was really a big, big issue in the neighborhood. And that got me very interested in joining with a number of groups, environmental groups, NYPIRG, for example, and actually fighting to close this incinerator. And we fought for a number of years, had a number of demonstrations. And then finally, we were able to successfully close the incinerator, maybe after about a 10-year fight. And by this time, I was now a lawyer. And I found, I got involved working with some political groups. Again, initially fighting to close this incinerator and keep it closed. And one of the things that was very interesting in law was that at that time, after we closed the incinerator, the Department of Sanitation wanted to open a new incinerator. They wanted to build a state-of-the-art, brand new incinerator that they assured us would be perfectly safe and it wouldn't have all the problems of the old one. And one of the problems of the old one was that it had never been licensed to operate. It had operated by the city of New York for 30 years without ever getting the permit that was needed in order for it to operate. And it kept, promising, we're going to get the permit, give us another year, give us another year. They never got the permit. They finally had to close it. So now they were going to build a new incinerator, and lo and behold, it was going to have a permit to operate. And they had to go through a whole set of series of, steps that they had to take. And one of them, in order to get the permit and in order to be able to operate, was they had to do an environmental study of whatever the negative impacts of that incinerator would be. Or if there were no negative impacts, they could simply make a declaration. We're not doing a study because there's no negative impacts to study. And they chose to somehow claim that. They said that they didn't need to do any environmental study about the negative impacts of this incinerator because it would have no negative impacts. Well, I at that point, and I represented at that time a city official, Elizabeth Holtzman, and also I represented the local assemblyman in my district in a lawsuit challenging that decision, saying that it was clearly unreasonable and arbitrary and capricious for the city to claim they didn't have to do an environmental impact study because the incinerator would have no negative impacts whatsoever. And so I was the attorney for Elizabeth Holtzman and for the local assemblyman at that time, Frank Barbaro. And I worked together with NYPIRG, who also joined us in the lawsuit as an additional petitioner. And so I worked with them and with my clients, and we won the lawsuit. And the incinerator was stopped. And that was really my first introduction to political, happenings in the district. And I went on to continue to practice law as a neighborhood lawyer. And then I went on in 1996 to be elected to the state assembly. And I basically have been in the state assembly since then. And I have great interest in terms of education. I have great interest in terms of environmental issues. I have great interest in terms of constituent services, helping the constituents in this area on whatever they need. And my office sees close to 4,000 people a year. And we, try to protect the neighborhood and help the neighborhood so that its concerns can be met. And one of the great, things that I pride myself in is I represent a district which is a district of immigrants. The immigrants came from different parts of the world. In the early 1900s, many of them came from Italy and Ireland and Eastern Europe. And then in the 2000s, many came from the former Soviet Union. And then, in the last, 10 years, many have come from China and South America and also from the Middle East. And one of the things that I have tried very hard to do, and I think we've been fairly successful in doing it, is getting everybody to work together. Everybody has common interests. And as we get to celebrate each other's traditions, as we get to celebrate each other's customs and, values and food and language, we learn that we have a lot in common. And when you bring people together, then you're able to accomplish a great deal. And I've, applied that, in the neighborhoods here. And we've gotten a lot of, people who are in common on issues like the SHSAT, because education affects everybody. And this is why I very strongly have been involved in the fight to keep the SHSAT and to get the Department of Education to start meeting the needs of all students. If a student is excelling in the academics, they need to have a curriculum and schools and challenges to bring that talent out fully. If a student is excelling in terms of music and the art, we need to have schools and curriculum to develop that particular interest and that talent that they have. If we have students that are excelling in vocational matters, if we have students excelling in science, if we have students who are underperforming, we need to have special programs geared towards bringing them up so that they can reach their fullest potential. And, I learned this when I was a teacher. Basically, I taught in the elementary schools, mostly 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. And I also, learned it as a lawyer, as I practiced law. And, I use those backgrounds and those experiences that I had, in terms of bringing my assembly district together and fighting on important issues like education and environment and other such issues, higher education. These basically gave me the knowledge and the experience so that I can bring my district together and fight along these issues and many other issues that might affect the families of the district.
Very specifically with the SHSAT, because that's really been a huge talking point, and we have a very large following of families at Queller Prep who are very concerned about the future of standardized testing. My question to you is, in what capacity are you able to help preserve the integrity of this exam and the future of excellent schools? That's the question I'm going to stop at the moment, because it's a very passionate area, and it's hard for me to even continue. But taking it one step at a time, once again, what can you do with your abilities to preserve the integrity of the test and to help make sure that there are excellent free schools for New York City students?
We have been fighting very hard. And one of the things I've been able to do is to bring together many different communities, many different groups in the community to recognize the importance of education. And if you're going to have improvements in quality education, you cannot simply eliminate and hide those things that judge how well a student is doing. You have to take all your students and you have to meet their needs on wherever they're at. So in terms of the SHSAT, when I was a teacher, for 2 years out of, or 3 years actually, out of the 11 years that I taught in elementary school in District 13 at PS 56, I taught IGC classes, intellectually gifted classes. Now, my students were almost all Black. They were African-American students. And yet they did have an IGC program in that school. And my students were reading and doing math and science years above grade level. And they, in fact, during that time period, were among the students who were taking the SHSAT when they got, to the age, the grade that, it was given, and they were passing it. And these were many of the students who comprised the majority of students in Brooklyn Tech, one of our specialized high schools.
Yeah.
Back in that time in the 90s, these African-American students who were given IGC classes in elementary school as well as in middle school when they were made available to them, and those children who qualified for it, participated in it, they were passing the SHSAT. So when someone says to me that the SHSAT is the problem, it's clear to me it is not the problem. The problem is that we've eliminated the intellectually gifted classes in the early grades and in the middle school grades for African-American students. Many of the areas like District 13, which had a large percentage of African-American and Hispanic students, and they had those gifted programs. The children who were able to, who were performing at a high level were going into those programs and they were passing the SHSAT.
Yes.
And you had a very large number of, children like in my classes, they wanted to go to Brooklyn Tech. That was their goal. That was the school of choice for them. It was in the area of Brooklyn. It was easy to get to. They didn't have to take long train trips, subway trips. They were able, that was the school they wanted to go to. They passed the SHSAT and they were admitted to Brooklyn Tech. And it was only when they started canceling the gifted programs in those districts that all of a sudden you had a big drop in the number of African-American and Hispanic students who were getting admitted into the specialized high schools. So the problem was they eliminated the pipeline, which would lead them to be able to pass that test and to be able to proceed with their education and reach the highest levels. Now, what happened to the families whose children were going to those schools, the specialized high schools? Well, they fortunately got in and they proceeded and got an excellent education. The children, after they closed the intellectually gifted programs, their parents were very angry and they were very upset because the public school system was not offering gifted classes in their neighborhoods and in their schools. Many of those students ended up going to parochial schools, Catholic schools in the neighborhood. Many of them ended up, when charter schools began to develop, transferring to charter schools. Many of them were even accepted into private elite schools, yet that welcomed them because they wanted to have children who were able to perform. They fit in. They were above grade level. They were performing. They could pass tests, and private schools actually gave them scholarships, sometimes full scholarships, to be able to attend their school. So the problem here with the SHSAT is not that the exam is the problem. The problem is that the students in the public schools are not being given the gifted classes and the enhancement that they need to get in order to pass the exam. And so that's one of the reasons, like, where programs like you have, are so helpful, in getting more and more children the knowledge, the experience, the training to be able to pass a test. And it would be even more helpful if the Department of Ed started restoring gifted programs in every school district. They should not be denying children in certain districts the opportunity to be into a gifted program, to be into a program that would enhance them and prepare them so that they could pass the SHSAT. And that's one of the things I have legislation to try to accomplish. We need to keep the SHSAT because it sets the standards. It has been historically shown to be the best vehicle for judging who's going to succeed in a specialized high school. But we need also to restore the gifted programs in the districts that have not been getting those gifted programs, where they've been eliminated, so that their children have a chance to be able to pass the SHSAT. And of course, we need to increase the quality of programs and education to meet the needs of all children, so that if the child is interested in music and the arts, we need to provide programs and curriculums to develop their interest. If a child is interested in science, we need to develop programs and curriculum to meet their interest. And if a child is having trouble, is falling behind in performance in reading and math and other aspects, then we need to provide remedial programs and tutorial programs to bring those children up. And if we do that, then we're going to begin to see quality education. And we're also going to begin to see that children will reach their full potential because they're being offered the programs and the courses that they need in order to meet the talents and the skills that they are developing.
So I have to tell you a funny story. So today, as I speak to you, I'm 39. I have 3 of my own little children. I had a newborn recently, and so I'm a pretty busy mommy. So back when I was in my early 20s, running, figuring out how to organize Queller, I just assumed, as a young girl who's really ambitious, that I could just go to the Department of Ed, tell them that I have a great idea, and I want you to help me get students, and I'm going to charge very little money. I mean, I had oh my goodness, almost no overhead now back then. So this is a really funny story. So I went to the Department of Ed, and someone kindly and honestly told me, this is what he said. He said, I want to be frank with you. The kids that you're aiming to help are too smart. We're not going to fund you. And I appreciate that he was honest with me, because it redirected me, and Queller at that point became a privately funded program. So I have customers, I have Uber drivers who pay for tutoring. It's crazy, in the thousands of dollars. I have immigrants, I have hair salon workers. I can't even tell you what a range of families we have where they struggle, they pay, they're single parents, they pay. They pull their kids out of, a private school just so that they can pay for tutoring, as some parents actually feel the tutoring is more effective than the school. So would you believe that almost 20 years ago, when I went to the Department of Ed, and, I was always in a motor. So I was really looking to make a difference. I was told I will not get 1 penny of funding because the kids I'm aiming for are too smart to begin with. So then I was redirected, and the suggestion was made for me to work with what is now known as Title I, failing schools, kids who are in jeopardy of, they're not going to graduate. So they said, you need to target, if you want funding, you need to target kids who are really, really, about to fail. So, I'm sharing this with you because I want you to know, like, this was my lived experience. I went to, from Queens all the way to Brooklyn, all the way to Department of Ed. And I just had the door closed on me, and they said, you're wasting your time. We're not going to help. And my response back then was, but what about kids like me, who want opportunities and resources and how to get ahead? What about someone like me who wants to go to a great college, and I don't want to live in a little apartment like my parents, and I don't want to struggle like my immigrant family struggles. I don't want to be in a rental unit for 20 years, So it's really very interesting because, here I am now, and I've, definitely built quite a reputation for myself. But I will say that my initial, starting point was just like tremendous shock. I'm sharing this story with you because it was very revealing about where the goals are. So it's really interesting. The Title I schools from 20 years ago are still tight, they're still failing. So the failing schools are still failing. Meanwhile, the DOE was completely unwilling to invest in programs to help accelerated kids get ahead and reach their academic goals and go to great colleges and get great scholarships. And I'm very, very thankful for where I am today. I don't know to what extent you've researched me or my background, but I mean, we have tens of thousands of families on the mailing list, subscriptions. We had 200, we had a college prep webinar that we just have a tremendous, unbelievable reach. And here I was really, trying to get tax dollars to fund it. So I'm very thankful that I get to share this and convey this information to you, that there was just no way for kids to excel or to have resources to excel. And the attempts were just futile. Why are you even trying to help these kids? They're smart already.
And when I was an IGC teacher, one of the problems, and I believe, in my opinion, it's the reason why they systematically shut down those gifted programs in the public schools, was that because I had one class out of 4 classes on the grade. The children in my class were reading years above grade level and doing math and science. The children in the other classes were years below grade level. And parents were coming up to the school and the district and saying, the child down the block is reading. How come my child is not reading? So the problem was that we were not educating each child at the level they were at. And I do remember one, very funny experience that, when I was teaching the IGC class, the district I was in decided, because they were doing very poorly, the district as a whole, in terms of, standardized tests and reading scores. So they decided that for this year, every single classroom in the district was going to do phonics between 9 o'clock and 9:45. And the superintendent in the district was going to provide the teachers with the lesson plans for that phonics class. And every teacher would have to exactly follow those lesson plans. And I had an IGC class reading, 3 years above grade level, but I was supposed to teach them, phonics like ah, eh, ooh, ah. They were way beyond that. And frankly, I said to the principal, I said, I can't teach that to these children. They'll be hanging from the lights. They would be bored to death. And so the principal said, all right, I'm going to have the reading coordinator come into your classroom and demonstrate how you could teach a lesson like this to this class. And she came in and I sat there and I watched, and she started going through this lesson, and the kids were becoming very unruly. They were totally bored. They weren't paying any attention, and I just sat back and I said, let's see what she's going to do. And it was a disaster. And they never bothered me again about, teaching that lesson, because the Department of Ed has to develop programs to meet all children's needs. And the bright child has needs just as much as the child who was into music and art, the child who was into science, and the child who was underperforming. And it is the job of the Department of Education to come up with programs that meet the needs of all these children. In fact, what was happening was, because the children in my class were doing so well, the Department of Ed was being shown up for the fact that it was failing to provide a quality education to all the children in the school. And so what did they do? Did they try to find programs to meet the needs of other children so they could meet the needs of all children? No, they tried to decide to eliminate the IGC class, so now they wouldn't be shown up by having one class performing very well and the other 3 performing very poorly, and parents recognizing that there's a difference in what's happening in the education their children are getting. And that, is when they try to eliminate the SHSAT, I think that's what they're really doing. They're distracting attention from the fact that the Department of Education needs to do a much better job with all the children in their system. And, they need to make the improvements so that there will be quality education for all children. And they are depriving the gifted children of being given the opportunity to advance to their fullest potential, because every child must receive quality education at the level they're at the interest that they're at, and at whatever progress they have made, so that they can all be advanced to the highest potential possible.
I want to really just say thank you so much for saying this. I want to also say thank you for carving out time from your very busy schedule, for putting this together, for allowing me to record the webinar and share the webinar. I really want you to know that I'm speaking on behalf of so many families when I tell you that you need to continue fighting the good fights. So I was there. I was the public school student who was constantly told, slow down, stop going so fast. Why are you aiming so high? You can aim lower. And as I pursued my higher degree, and it really opened my eyes. I went to New York University, the Steinhardt School of Education. I went to Hofstra. I passed the New York State Bar in my first try. I really learned about how the education system works when you know the material and everything well. I just want to say thank you. I cannot say thank you enough for fighting the good fight. And I speak on behalf of a lot of families and followers who are just very frustrated listening to the fact that they cannot perform on a math and English test because they're Black, or because they're Hispanic, or because they are, I don't even know anymore. It's just, it's like they're making things up at this point to say why a student cannot perform, when the reality is they're never given the tools to properly perform to begin with. So I want to, because I want to just kind of conclude the webinar by saying that I can't thank you enough for fighting the good fight, because what you're doing is you speak on behalf of those who cannot. And I'm extremely thankful, and quite frankly, I'm blessed that I have this platform where I can also speak, and I'm the voice for these children who don't know what they're missing out on by not having a great education, or by not having access to an outstanding education. And my confidence and my abilities as a woman, as a leader, as a business owner, as someone who's now raising a family, and I have 3 little kids in my house, I juggle, I have a lot of hats. And I really want to say, I don't know where I would be if I didn't have the excellent education I had. And I was there. I was there in a very large public school. I attended Cardozo High School myself. And a lot of things I learned about education, I learned after the fact. I just want to let you know that on behalf of so many, we're very grateful for the fight that you keep fighting, and the uphill battle to keep academic excellence and high standards in academia. William, we really just cherish the efforts that you're making, because a lot of people, they just feel like they're very hopeless right now.
And I really have to greatly admire the work that you have done with Keller Prep. It's very sad to me that you offered the Department of Education the opportunity to take advantage of your knowledge, your skills in helping children, and they turned it down. But you had to then go into your own Keller Prep and found that and build that up, and to help the children that needed this help. And it's sad that the Department of Education failed to recognize that, or for whatever political reasons they had, chose not to go down the path, and instead chose a path of basically covering up and failing to admit and to change the fact that they needed to provide quality education for all children. And I was one of the fighters in terms of the CFE, making sure that the public schools get the monies that they need. But the problem is they have to use those monies to really create quality education. And if that doesn't happen, unfortunately, throwing monies at the problems is probably not going to work. As much as we need to support education, we need to have resources for education, but unfortunately the monies have to be used by educators, not just bureaucrats who are making decisions based upon political agenda that they may have, instead of the quality education of meeting the needs of all of our children, including those children who are performing very well because, they want to learn, they've got the ability to learn, as well as the children who are not performing so well because they need more remedial and tutorial work in order to bring them up to par. And the children in the middle, and the children who have an interest in different aspects of a career, science, music, art, construction, vocational, whatever. We need to make sure all our children get to the highest possible level that they are capable of doing. And the Department of Ed has to challenge them to do that.
Thank you. Thank you so much, William. And I am really excited to share that there are a couple of kids from Queller who would like to explore interning for you. How can they reach you? What's the best way to contact you?
Probably the best is to email me to my personal email, because I see all of those myself, although it's getting larger and larger, that list, but I still get to it, which is William, the letter C and the number 8 at verizon.net. William C8 at verizon.net. And we do have interns. They're not paid positions mostly.
Correct.
We we do have some SYEP youth program interns, but we also have volunteer interns who get a tremendous experience in the office. Their parents want them to come. And, we do all kinds of things. They learn office experiences. They also sometimes will do voter registration. Sometimes they'll go with me to different meetings and different events. And I really think that, the students who come in through this office, we hear from them as they go out of the office and they apply for college. And, it makes me very happy when one of them comes to me and says, can you give me a letter of recommendation? I'm applying for admission to this college or this job. And I'm very happy to do that because, this is how another practical way of making it easier for students to be able to reach their full potential.
That's great. That is so great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Mine are 5, 6, and 3 months. So I will be sending them your way. I hope.
Okay.
So that they will
definitely.
learn. They will learn to be politically active. And I'm really honored, William. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. And I'm so excited to share this video with the families at Queller Prep. Thank you, William. Have a wonderful
The potential
evening.
is great. And, they're very lucky to be associated with Queller Prep because Queller Prep really does advance them, give them the skills, the techniques that they need. Because one of the skills you do need is how to take a test.
Yes.
Other skills is knowledge, but I think Queller Prep, from what I have learned about it, what I've heard about it, meets the full needs of all its children and really develops them and nurtures them and brings them to the full potential. And, as I said, it's sad that you offered this possibility to the Department of Education and they didn't see the value in it and the importance of it and how that could really affect a quality education for the children in the system. But you still managed to reach children and to provide them, with the benefits of what you knew would work and made it work in Queller Prep. And that's a real accomplishment. And, I really commend you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We are excited to also share. We would love for you to visit us anytime.
I would
We're
love to
based
do
in,
that.
we have
Yes.
families from all over. Thank you, William. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening. And thank you for this wonderful, heartwarming, uplifting, inspiring webinar and presentation from the kindness of your heart. Thank you for responding to my email, requesting this, and I can't wait to share this with the families. Thank you.
And thank you for the
William.
opportunity
Thank
to
you.
do this because it also, when I'm inspired by what I see happening, that gives me the energy to keep doing more, as I'm sure is the case with you.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
it's something that, we all, feed on each other's optimism and energy and dedication to quality education for all of our students.
Absolutely. Thank you, William. Have a wonderful evening. Thank
Yes,
you.
you
Good
too
night.
now. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye now.